Hey guys, good evening and welcome once again to Dead Air Full Spectrum on our Sunday night show, 8 p.m. And welcome everybody again to 2 hours of incredible discussions, topics, and guests in and around surrounding the paranormal. My name is George Lopez. Joining me shortly will be Mr. Ken DaCosta out of Rhode Island as soon as I don't know until he's figures out how to plug in his computer. He's having some technical difficulties right now, but he'll be joining us in just a little bit. In about 30 minutes, we'll be having our very special guest tonight, Lee Speigel. Now, we're going off the topic of what would normally be the ghosts, the paranormal, because same thing. It's no different. A lot of people who are part of the paranormal field, they love to go out and do ghost hunting over the weekends. It's nice every once in a weekend to just go out to the beach or to go out to a bar and have some drinks or have some dinner with some friends, a change of environment. And Lee Speigel joining us, even though this man has decades and decades of experience in and around the paranormal, not just the UFO community. We're going to be speaking specifically with him. We are, of course, simulcasting with KGRA, digital broadcasting. You can also see KGRA with the YouTube channel and also KGRA on Facebook. If you guys not getting the app yet for KGRA, I highly recommend that you do so because this gives you guys the opportunity if you're traveling, which holidays are coming around the corner here. You don't have to miss any of the topics, any of the wonderful shows on KGRA. So you make sure you guys do check it out. For those of you joining us for the first time here on our channel, Dead Air Full Spectrum, please go ahead at this point in time, hit that subscribe button. Don't forget the thumbs up and the reminder bell for upcoming content. But a lot of things have been going on in this field right now with regards to Halloween just being completed. A lot of different people doing investigations and a lot of people having these incredible paranormal gatherings. And there's no shortage of that. I know one of our dear friends, Tony Spera, just had a major event where he basically had on display a lot of the incredible haunted pieces that have been in the Ed Warren Museum and was able to present them out there. I know a couple of our dearest friends had the opportunity to go out there and take some pictures next to Annabelle, the real Annabelle in the movie Annabelle, and some of the other items that again, I posted some stuff on TikTok about Robert the Doll when Robert the Doll was on with us, and it got some backlash. People going, "You don't take video or pictures of Robert the Doll unless you ask permission. You could be cursed now." And I said, "Well, joke's on you. I've been cursed a lot longer than that." But we have um, some great photos from that particular visit. And again, some of these people who put some of the pictures of where they were at with Tony Sparrow and these haunted items out there on social media. Make sure you guys do check it out. Excuse me. We are still fighting this cold. And unfortunately, I know that Ken has also contracted this cold. We're probably going to mute and cough throughout our journey tonight. So please bear with us through all of that. Hope you guys are on. I see Joseph Frezes in the chat with us and Grace Twilly, Pepper Jackie. Hello, guys, and welcome and join us again for a spectacular show. Again, bottom of the hour, we'll be having our guest joining us. Mr. DaCosta, if you're ready to join me as well, sir, I see you off screen. Please go ahead and do so. We got some things to talk about. How are you?
Good. I certainly hope so. I apologize for the lateness of my appearance tonight.
Not at all.
But we're having
It'll be coming out of your paycheck.
That's all right. You can dock me. We're having a little Wi-Fi issue here out in the sticks. So hopefully I'm good to go now, but I'm sure you guys will let me know. Hello. How is everybody tonight? Thank you for joining us.
And how are you feeling?
Working our way through it a little bit more baritone than I usually am, but Not too bad. I think the worst may be yet to come, but that's all right.
I'm right now just posting on the Dead Air Full Spectrum Facebook page and my page as well, so everybody can come here to the link and join us. I encourage you guys also that are in the chat, if you've not posted the link for the show yet, let everybody know where we are at and what we are doing this evening, so that we can just have a fun time. We'll open up the phone lines, I would imagine, Ken, in the second hour with our very special guest tonight, in case you guys either want to ask some questions or maybe even share some UFO experiences that you might have had. I know, Ken, you've had a couple of experiences in your
Yeah,
life.
I have actually, where I witnessed some weird aerial phenomena and reported it to New Fork, and actually I'm on the record as
Really?
being a reportee. So there is quite a bit actually, and here in Rhode Island, on our website riseupparanormal.com, we have a constant updating of a database that we've put on there for Rhode Island sightings, and just recently got a couple of calls with people who have seen some things. Not really much to go into. I mean, there's no trace evidence other than to tell them if it happens again, to steer them in the right direction. And
Right.
if it's a credible report, get it on the databases of MUFON and New Fork and describe it. And, lacking any pictures or video, you're always looking for that common thread. Maybe one particular area has a lot of sightings over a defined period of time. And, the right people will come and pay some attention to it.
To the degree that, and that's one of the things that expecting our guest to come on tonight and do some research, you guys are almost neck and neck for the time period that you got into the paranormal. And it just, again, wasn't just Lee's focus 100% on ufology, but he also followed the aspects of spirit phenomena, poltergeist. So it'll be interesting to see two of the most experienced people I know in the field compare notes as he joins us tonight. But you have had an experience with regards to UFOs or multiple experiences out there. It's for somebody who really can't say that he has, that I've looked up in the night sky or the daytime sky and have seen anything. Where does your belief system stand with a lot of the other claims that are out there? Let me kind of relate that to the people that are in the chat there too. You have a spiritual experience, you have a ghostly experience. Um, Being one time out at Trans-Allegheny Lunatic Asylum, and somebody said, "Oh yeah, I was up there on the third floor, and this invisible force lifted me and threw me up against the wall." And he's telling this in the break room, and then he gets on the phone. "Hi, honey, how are the kids doing?" If that happens to us, we're kind of going to be off kilter for a little while. It's going to affect us dramatically, and we're going to get into something that's affected you dramatically recently too here in a few minutes.
Sure.
But does that same kind of, I guess, skepticism fall under the same category for those who have experienced UFO encounters?
I think
Can
so.
can you can you tell a fake one? Is what I'm saying.
Yeah. I mean, and I want to get into this with Lee Speigel later on about how we view this now, because the dynamics have changed now generationally in this era than they were in the 40s and 50s and 60s when people were taking pictures of these things. So, yeah, I want to talk to him at length about that. But I think a healthy dose of skepticism is necessary. Now, I'm not talking about being a skeptic. I'm talking about being skeptical. And those are two different things. They're not the same animal. A skeptic just doesn't believe any of this stuff exists, and there's always a reason for it. Being skeptical is to stop and ask some questions. And that's just being objective. And I think the phenomena is all the same. There are people who go to places specifically to find ghosts. There are people who skywatch specifically to spot aerial phenomena. But for the most part, a lot of people who are experiencers of both of these type of phenomena aren't looking for anything. They're just going about their business, and suddenly they have an encounter or a sighting. They're not necessarily believers or disbelievers. They
Construction
just
workers or people who
anybody.
work in, yeah, restaurant workers and have
When
experiences.
when I had a sighting of something odd, I was at work. I was in a truck going to a location, and we were stopped for a school bus, and I saw something through the window, metallic, way off in the distance, cylindrical, sort of an upright cylinder. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm looking through a windshield. Am I seeing a reflection of some chrome off someone's car or a light? So I already kind of had this process as an investigator where I just simply rolled down the window and stuck my head out to get rid of any reflective surfaces. And yep, there it was, glistening, and suddenly dropped at 45 degrees and just went poof and vanished. So at first, when it's hovering, a
Well,
lot of times when you see aircraft flying away from you, they look like they're hovering. So you kind of put that in your mind. And then when this thing dropped at a tremendous speed and then just literally vanished, I said, well, okay, I've seen something that's not quite right, and felt so serious about it that I did, when I got home that night, reported it to the MUFON and New Fork databases, because I was convinced that I saw something anomalous. I'm not going to say it's an alien craft. I think that's a lot of times where we have to draw the line. A UFO, or as they refer to them now, UAP, unidentified aerial phenomena, is just exactly that. We're not sure if they're piloted by an intelligence. There is evidence that suggests that perhaps that's so, but it's just something unidentified. So that's what I saw. Not to take the leap of faith, but I saw something that just wasn't quite right.
two quick questions. First of all, when you're talking about this upright cylinder, similar to The Arrival, the movie The Arrival, like that?
Oh, I don't know.
Oh,
You
not as
know,
big.
it was off in the distance, like I said, but
Yeah.
definitely was a sunny December morning, clear sky, and it was just reflecting the sunlight off of it. So
And when was this? What year?
this would have been in 2015.
Oh, not that long ago.
No,
Wow.
no,
Okay.
not at all.
So this is not something over years, kind of, the memory's a little fuzzy
No.
about it. No, this is pretty damn clear.
Well, the memory gets fuzzy, but not about this.
Not about that at all. Lee Speigel going to be joining us at the bottom of the hour. So for those of you just joining us, welcome to Dead Air on the Dead Air Full Spectrum channel on YouTube. Ken, you had an interesting weekend
I did.
last week. You were at the Conjuring House for the Dark Zone event, and Saturday night, I think you were there, correct?
30th, Saturday night. Yep.
Saturday night, you were there. The parent family was there.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, Jay Blumke, Susan Slaughter, a host of people that looking at, and of course the most, I guess, the kind of weather that you would hope for a horror movie, but not for an investigation.
It was awful. I mean, it literally was raining sideways, which
So,
was unfortunate because I wanted to do some geological stuff in the yard, because I've always been of the mind that a lot of what goes on there isn't necessarily based around the house, but on the land itself. So I wanted to take some soil samples, but that didn't work out. So we went, in a different direction, but quite an emotional night. And I guess an emotional weekend. It was very powerful.
yeah.
Listening to the parents' stories, things that they really have not revealed, even in Andrea's book, where they were back at a place that I think they're invested in and felt comfortable with, and really bared their souls about a lot of things that no one really to this point had heard of as far as their experiences, and they were very frank and very forthcoming.
10 years of experiences, man.
Very frank and forthcoming about their opinions.
Yeah.
not only about their experiences, but what the house has evolved to in this day and age in terms of the notoriety it's gotten, the publicity it's gotten. So if you haven't, I would give that a watch. It's available on the Dark Zone website. And I know that they're still compiling some things right now, but it was an interesting night. To say the least. When I was there was some pretty odd things happening. I wouldn't say there was anything profound,
Yeah.
more of a subtle type of thing, but that's just the nature of this beast.
Well, I wanted to share something with you, Ken, that I happen to catch on social media. Or my favorite thing to do when I'm bored out of my mind is TikTok. And I don't know when exactly this was caught. You might be able to clarify it. And I don't have audio on it, so I think you should be able to talk over it. But this is from our dear friends Brian and Rochelle, the stars of Sleepless Unrest, and
Mm-hmm.
friends of ours from here on Dead Air. A door opening at the Conjuring House.
Okay.
This is pretty compelling stuff. Why don't you guys take a look at this? Let me take this banner off real quick so you can see it full screen. But here you go. On the left, can you hear me, Ken?
I can.
All right, look to the left-hand side, everybody. The two green doors.
I can't get my eyes off the ghosts.
All right, you stop. That'll hypnotize you.
Okay,
I'll-
what that
eh,
is that is actually, you're looking at the what they call the seance room. I kind of refuse to call it that. It's actually the parlor, and that's one of two doors that lead to the library.
mhm.
And those two rooms were actually the focus of our investigation Saturday night. Myself, Mustafa Gadlari, Susan Slaughter, and members of the Heinzen family joined us in that. So it was interesting.
Have you seen that before?
I have not seen that particular clip before, but since I committed to being there, I saw a few clips of those particular doors opening and another one off the seance room that they shared with me. And the Heinzen kids, Madison and Kyler, have had many of those type of experiences. So they are at the point right now, because they're social media darlings, that
Yeah.
the good part about it is a lot of times when they're in their house, they always have their phones on
Yeah.
and recording something, and every once in a while you get a gem. That door, by the way, should not open with the, for lack of a better word, the impetus or the velocity that it did in that particular clip.
Right.
I mean, easing itself open. It's a 300-year-old house. Okay, so you've got door jams out of kilter. We understand that. But that should crawl at best, because we've tested it. It should not open with the speed that did. So that's unusual. That's compelling.
Yeah. And yeah, there was nothing adjusted as far as the speed was concerned on that video, right where it was given from. So,
Mhm.
yeah, in about a week, we got the okay today from Jay Blumke. And 1 week from today, we will be doing one of our favorite segments after these live events called Postmortem. And Postmortem of the Conjuring House event. So we'll be joined by Jay Blumke, and hopefully an ensemble cast of people who were there for this event, talking about their experiences, which may also include Andrea Perrin, Susan Slaughter, perhaps Mustafa. I don't know. We'll have to wait and see.
Yeah.
But we just got the green light this afternoon that they'll be joining us next week, reviewing this particular live event at the Conjuring House. So you make
Yeah.
sure you guys write it down on your calendar and set that time aside. Next time, Sunday at 8 p.m. Before our
interesting.
guest comes on here in about 10 minutes, Ken, there is a discussion you and I want everybody that's in the chat to just stay off your keyboard for a second and listen to this, because if you are a paranormal enthusiast, if you are a paranormal investigator, if you're a combination of both, this is something that you need to hear right now. Ken, you called me, I believe it was Saturday morning, with this information. And as a
Mm.
disclaimer, Ken and I discussed, there's a lot of this that still needs to be kept kind of sequestered. There's certain things we can't bring up with it, but
Yeah.
I was floored. And Ken, if you want to share with our audience right now, the floor is yours.
Yeah, sure. We were invited to investigate a specific location that at this point in time has to stay undisclosed. One of the reasons being that it is a public place, and eventually we'll be able to tell you where it is, but we're compiling data right now. And we also don't want them inundated by paranormal teams if it goes public that, in people's minds, the place is open for business, and it's not that type of location. The other reason that we're playing this close to the vest is there are families involved that aren't aware yet of exactly what happened there that night. Now, George alluded to Lee's years in the field and mine, and I mean, he actually may be one of those people who's got me by a couple of years. But I have seen apparitions. I've recorded voices, seen shadows. I've pretty much run the gamut of things that you'd expect in 40 years of doing this. And I have to tell you, and the reason I called George is because I just needed to talk to somebody, because my team, Rise Up Paranormal, went into this location. And typically what happens is eventually, sometimes you might get an EVP or a sighting, but you don't really get any real information. You ask for
Right.
names, and very rarely does someone said, "Hi, I'm Ted." A couple of people within the group who came with us have a technique
Oh,
that we have just been made aware of, and we have seen them at a different location exercise this technique. And the
successfully.
results were remarkable, because in doing this, and I'm really not trying to be mysterious here, because I spoke to them today, and I think they're willing to come forward with us, and I'm going to let
Oh,
them do that. Okay, I'm going to let them do that.
good.
But by a series of whatever the process they use, they are able to literally spell out first and surnames. And we were able to get 3 of them. So taking it one step further, we had 3 names of people that were associated with this location.
Right.
And then they went a step further, asking, what was the date of your death? And through their techniques, they were able to get 3 dates, one for each. We looked these people up. We looked their obituaries up. They were 3 for 3, not only in the names and the idea that all 3 were attached to this location, but all of the dates of death were absolutely correct. 2 of them this year, just recently, April and September, and one dating back to 2017. While they were in another room, we sequestered ourselves and started Googling, figuring that, well, we have names, and a couple of them, their pictures were up on the wall in a different room. And this wasn't the idea where they saw these pictures.
Right.
So we have their date of death, we have their full names, and in 2 cases, the names of surviving members of their family, one a wife, one a son. So, which makes this a little bit more sensitive in terms of, we don't want to come out with too much before we decide how or if we want to approach the family.
Yeah.
Out of respect for them, because they certainly don't want to learn about it on a live streaming show. This is something that has to be handled personally, because there were messages. But I guess
Sensitive.
in the long run, what we actually got were messages, full names that we were able to verify, dates of their death, again, that we were able to verify. And in one case, One person attached to this building came inside because he was called by the person who had allowed us to come in. Said, "Do you mind if I bring these two people in?"
Listen.
I said, "No." There were no introductions. They were just hanging around outside. So they came in, and they're both part of the organization. We'll leave it at that, of this building. And in one case, one of them was particularly close to one of the deceased. There were no introductions done, and the message was sent, "How are you, Chris?" We didn't know who Chris was until this young man stepped back with his mouth open and says, "That's me." And this guy was a mentor to me, and he meant a lot to me. Never, never, never. I think I would have to say this is the most profound experience I've ever had on an emotional and personal level, where it's not just a voice, or you know how it is, like, I'm getting the H word.
No, these were direct responses. And
it was remarkable.
And Ken, you and I have talked about this. For God knows how many years, whether it's on lectures or on the show, I brought up the fact someday, either a location or a technique or a piece of equipment or an individual or a group of individuals, we're going to figure out the key ingredients to making consistent contact with the other side.
Yeah.
I just never in a million years thought, Ken, that it was going to be somebody relatable
that we know.
That we know.
Yeah.
And for those of you who are like, okay, well, that's great, whether it's a Ouija board, and it's not so much the technique as the conduit of the technique. And again, when we have it set up that we can have you guys exposed to this and understand it, let me put it to you in this perspective of the potential behind what it is that Ken and these other people, these incredible people, have discovered. One of the responses from the other side of the veil,
I almost forgot,
blew my mind. It wasn't, the names and the dates and the people they knew. One was an inquiry. One was a question from the other side. How is this possible?
Yeah.
Ooh.
True.
So,
yeah,
where do we go with something like that? That remains to be seen. And I would definitely invite you guys to stay close to Full Spectrum and Dead Air and see what's coming up, because it won't be too long. Hopefully, Ken. I know you had a dialogue with them today, so we'll see what happens.
Within, hopefully, the next couple of weeks, we'll be able to talk a little bit more about this openly. We do have a question. Ufi Atari, I believe, were electronics involved? No, Ufi.
Yeah.
Or was this a form of mediumship? Not mediumship in the sense that we're used to. No one was sitting there getting messages coming through and channeling. It wasn't any of that type of thing.
All right. Let's just call it what it is. We brought out the operation game, and then every time we wanted a yes or no answer, the nose would light up.
Yeah, we're going with that.
Mr. DaCosta, our very special guest, is in the green room, sir. If you would like to introduce our guest this evening.
It would be my great and distinct pleasure. Our guest over the last 5 decades has researched and reported on many varieties of the paranormal via recordings, radio, television, print media, audio and video interviews, and lectures from ABC, CBS, NBC, the United Nations, Omni Magazine, AOL, the Huffington Post, and right here on the KGRA Digital Broadcast Network. He's also co-produced, co-written an important 2020 UFO documentary, The Phenomenon. He's presented the often overlapping worlds of UFO science and unexplained phenomena to an eager public. It is our distinct pleasure to welcome Mr. Lee Speigel to Dead Air tonight.
Wow. Did I do all of those things? Jeez.
You remember? Do you remember those things, Lee?
Do I even remember? That's a good point.
It's impossible for him to have been doing it for that long. The man only looks 40.
Thank you very much. I could tell you my age if you want to really know.
No, I just think we'll go with the drinking the virgin blood thing at this point, Lee. You look great.
Well, thank you, and you know what? What? By the way, welcome, guys, to KGRA.
Thank you.
It's nice to have you here, and we're going to get into a couple of things that you probably will not be expecting me to talk about, but I probably will want to, because I just heard the two of you mention something that's very close to my heart.
Wonderful.
Among the things that I've researched or looked into over the years, one of them actually began with a Ouija board. Oh yeah.
There you go.
I mean, big time Ouija board stuff. So,
Yeah. Well, we're a blank canvas tonight for you, Lee. You know, there's a lot to unpack, and I know there's a lot to unpack with you tonight, and we'll get there. But you can take us in whatever direction that you desire, because we're going to talk a little bit about how this all ties into the UFO phenomena
sure,
a little bit later.
Sure.
So I have a specific question for you as far as that type of thing.
Good. I hope to have a specific answer for you as well.
We'll give it our shots. Before we even start, how was your summer? How have you been?
Very, very well, thank you. It's funny you said, "How was your summer?" And I'm thinking it's cold here, and it's like it's no longer summer.
Florida, 45 degrees tonight.
Yeah, I'm thinking we're probably just going to be missing fall altogether, and like any moment there'll be snowing. But you never know. But everything is fine out here, way out here at almost the end of Long Island, New York. Are the two of you? Are you in the same geographical location?
I am in Rhode Island, actually.
Ah, okay.
I'm a hop, skip, and a jump away from you.
Yes, you are.
And I'm staying away from snow as much as I possibly can.
So you're what, in Guadalupe?
Close. So just north of Daytona Beach, but the same area.
Ah, okay.
The same language
Coming
spoken.
to you
also,
from the
all
sands of the Sahara.
If it gets any colder here in Florida, I'll be moving to Ecuador, but that's a whole other story.
Yeah.
But you look great. Everything's going fine. I suppose you're keeping busy.
I am, and one of the things that I keep busy at is this little thing called the Edge of Reality Radio.
Yes, sir.
That I do every week, and it's kind of a resurrected program of the original version that I did decades and decades ago when I was on NBC Radio. The original show was called The Edge of Reality, and then when I was getting ready to come on board to KGRA, I wanted to use the name Edge of Reality. And so I did and I wanted to have the domain name as well. So I did a domain name search and discovered that, nope, couldn't do it. There was some rock and roll band somewhere in the South calling themselves the Edge of Reality. and also there's a game company that refers to itself, a video game company, as Edge of Reality. So my lovely, brilliant muse wife Lorraine said to me, you're making yourself too crazy. Why don't you go online and see if you can find a free domain of just Edge of Reality Radio? And I thought, that kind of flows off the lips really nicely. Edge of Reality Radio has a good rhythm to it. So I went on, checked it out, found that I could have it, bought it right away, and here's Edge of Reality Radio. Just never knew, but boy, I guess if I was a rock and roll band too, I'd probably want to call it The Edge of Reality.
Yeah, I've always thought that a great name from an emo band, from our perspective, would be Footsteps in an Otherwise Empty Room.
Oh,
that would be a great song title.
Wow.
Album, or yeah,
but a hell of a bad T-shirt.
But you'd have to somehow be able to get some kind of audio effect with it as well, of footsteps actually coming around,
That is a given.
Exactly. But I'll leave you, Mr. DeCosta, for a little bit, because I will be coming back with a few questions of my own. And to your permission, Lee,
yes,
we have phone-in capability if you would like to get some questions from our audience in the second
Why
half of the
not?
show.
Why not?
That would be wonderful.
Very good, Mr. DeCote.
Yes, sir. All right, Lee. I want to start in. We'll kind of dig in
Mhm.
on the UFO question. Now, there's something we mentioned that I've been kicking around in this for a long time. Probably by the time I was in high school and started this, you were already moving mountains. And I'm talking specifically about the UN presentation, and I want to take you back to that a little bit. About your early forays into ufology,
Sure.
specifically the 1978 presentation at the UN. Generally speaking, we can read about things, but here you are. So your impressions, how was that received in your mind at the time?
Well, it took a while to make it come together, Ken. And because I had just finished back in those days in 1975, the very first thing I ever did in the whole UFO field was I got very lucky. I did a UFO documentary, spoken word vinyl. Do we remember vinyl records?
Mm-hmm.
And there it is. UFOs, the credibility factor. And did a pitch to CBS at the time, because CBS was the only company around. They were doing something very interesting and unique back then. On primetime television, almost nightly, when commercial breaks would come on, there would be commercials or infomercials at the time for recordings, the best of Mitch Miller and the gang, or the favorite Mantovani strings, where you could call in.
By the way, for some people in chat of a certain age, that used to be a men's choir.
Oh yes, that's right.
Yeah.
Thank you,
thank you.
thank you for letting them know. And I thought, boy, it would be really interesting if people, because I had been reading books about UFOs, and I was very interested in the topic, and I thought, boy, if people could hear the voices of real people, but not just private citizens. I was looking for some private citizens, but law enforcement officials, politicians, astronauts, military and commercial pilots, scientists. And if there was a way of putting all these voices together on some kind of a documentary recording, and then seeing if CBS would be willing to advertise it, offering it to the public through one of their 2-minute TV commercials, that would be a great way to get the information out. And that's kind of what happened throughout 1975 and then through the beginning of 76. I worked on the record album and had some amazing people on the album: Dr. J. Allen Hynek, Dr. Jacques Vallée, astronauts Gordon Cooper, Jim McDivitt, and on and on and on.
Yeah.
And when the record came out in early 1976, I started getting a little antsy, and I thought, well, this is great, getting the word out there, but I would like to reach a bigger audience somehow. And I came up with the idea, wouldn't it be great if I could somehow do a presentation at the United Nations? Because this had never been done before.
Pretty ambitious.
Well, I was shot down a lot by a lot of people who said, "Are you kidding? Nobody's going to let you do something like that at the United Nations. You can't just go up to the front door, knock on the door, and say, 'Hello, my name is Lee Speigel. I'd like to do a presentation here about UFOs.'"
Is Mr. Waldheim?
Yes, that's right. The Secretary General, Kurt Waldheim.
Right.
And I was told, even before I attempted to do something like that, they said, if you try to do that, you will either be politely asked to leave the premises, you'll never get past the security desk, and it's possible that you may even be arrested. I mean, spend the night in jail, go home.
Not a lot of great options.
No. People said to me, look, the only way that you, as an outsider from the United Nations, if you or anyone wants to do any kind of presentation there, you have to be either a citizen of a country that's interested in talking about UFOs or bringing it to the attention of all the other nations, or you have to become a delegate of a country that's interested in promoting the topic of UFOs. And if you can do either one of those two things, you might get a chance. Well, I knew right away there was no sense in even trying to get to my own government, the United States, because
this is where this story gets great.
well, I was thinking, well, I don't know, what am I going to do about this? And then in like late 1976, early 77, I started noticing that the prime minister of the little country called Grenada was making speeches at the United Nations, and occasionally the media would promote it a little bit, just show it on the nightly news. And he was involved with a personal crusade. Prime Minister Eric Gary was, because he had some sightings himself, so he said, and that there were many other people, citizens of his country, who were backing him with his crusade about UFOs. And so he tried to get the United Nations to consider putting an exploratory committee together to share UFO reports from one country to another, and to have some kind of a place. And obviously he wanted Grenada to be the clearinghouse place for this new committee. And he tried several times, and every time I saw him on the news, I thought, this guy, he's not doing it the right way. They're not paying attention to him, and I could tell. So I figured, well, how can I get to meet this man? And I'm sitting in my apartment, and I'm thinking, and I'm looking, hung up on my wall there is the front and back cover of UFOs: The Credibility Factor, the album that I had done for CBS. And I thought, boy, if I could get this thing into his hands, then maybe I've got something there. So I contacted the Grenada mission. All nations in New York or in the world have their own offices or missions, and they're all very close to the actual United Nations there in the city. So I looked up the number for the Grenada mission, called them, got someone on the phone, asked if I could speak to one of the ambassadors, and they were very friendly to me. I introduced myself to them, and I said that I had just recently finished production of a record album, a documentary about UFOs, and there are many people who are on this album who I think your prime minister would be very interested in, because I don't think he's getting anyone at the United Nations to pay attention to what he would like to do. So I would like to give you a copy of my album to forward to your prime minister with my compliments. And they said, come on down, come say hello to us. So
this obviously this was in 1976 because
right.
Yeah.
So I went down to their mission. And they couldn't have been nicer. The ambassadors were very nice, and the one who was the friendliest to me, his name was Ambassador Francis Redhead. Gotta love a name like that, Ambassador Redhead. And he wasn't, but it was very nice to meet them, and they said that they would definitely make sure that the prime minister would get the album. And a couple of weeks later, they called me and they said that the prime minister is coming to New York very soon to be knighted in a ceremony. He's going to become Sir Eric Gary. Okay. And we would like to invite you to the presentation, to the evening's events. And he would like to have a private meeting with you after the event takes place. And I said, yes, let me check my schedule. I think I can be there.
Yeah, I can squeeze you in.
It's like they said, we'll leave your name at the security desk, because I had never actually even been inside the United Nations. Mm-hmm. Even as a tourist, I just never went. So it was a great evening. Got all dressed up. It was as you can imagine, Ken, to be in a situation like that. The international cuisine was remarkable. of what they had to serve people. Can you think about that at the United Nations?
Can you give me a little
I
case,
couldn't,
no pun intended.
I couldn't even remember, but there were things from different countries that I had to keep asking, what is that, and why is it that color? And
nothing that crawled away from you.
Nothing that crawled away.
So there's that.
Yeah. And so it was interesting to see all the pomp and circumstance of doing something like that at the UN. When it was over, when the ceremony was over, I was brought into a small room, and then one of the ambassadors brought in Sir Eric Gehry, the leader of the country. And, which I thought was a little weird, they left us alone together. I mean, really? All right, I'm not a terrorist, but would you just leave the leader of your country alone with someone who's here to possibly help? But they knew who I was at that point because they had the album. He had seen the album and heard it, and he said that he enjoyed it and what was my idea. And I had also brought with me a written proposal of what I would like to do on behalf of Grenada. And I said, well, Mr. Prime Minister, with all due respect, I've been watching you on TV, listening to things that you've been saying to the media to try and do something at the United Nations about UFOs. But again, nobody seems to be giving you what you're looking for. They're not opening the door for anything involving UFOs. And I'd like to offer my assistance. And here's my proposal. And if you like what I've put together here, and if you certainly like any of the people who you heard on the record album, I'm sure I can get some of them to come to the United Nations and to speak at the UN on your behalf.
Hell of a platform.
I mean, I had nothing else going for me at that time. So he went through the proposal, really enjoyed it, and he said, this seems like a very good idea. And literally, Ken, over a handshake, we made a deal. And the next couple of things that began to happen were, first, in the mail, I received, there's an envelope, and inside the envelope was something that was about the size of a business card or a credit card. It was a delegate's card that they had created for me with the United Nations logo at the top, and it had country of Grenada, delegate advisor Lee Speigel for 33rd General Assembly session, blah, 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 1978.
Lee, how old were you at this point?
Well, okay, so this was 1978. So I was born in 49. I was like 29 years old, when this happened.
I couldn't even describe what I was doing at 29 years old. And
tell me, what were you doing?
Delegate. Well, I those years are a blur. I don't even remember. But here you are as a UN delegate at 29. Well,
it was like Indiana Jones. I was just making it up as I went along. Basically, I had no real plan because I had to make it all up. I already knew who on the album I wanted to bring to the UN, and the Prime Minister had a good idea as well. He said, "Do you think you could get Dr. Hynek and Dr. Valet? Could they be?" I said, "Yes, yes. That's why I'm here." So I got the delegates card, and I tell you, Ken, that was amazing because for the rest of that year in 1978, anytime I had to go to the United Nations for any meetings with people, or to go into their archives, their audio-visual archives, to look for things that we might want to use, all I had to do when I got up to the security desk was just show them my little delegates card, and they just, ushered me in. I could go wherever I wanted to go, within reason, of course, into the United Nations.
Did you have diplomatic immunity at that time?
No.
Oh, okay. I just figured I'd ask.
No, no, and the next thing that happened that I found out later was the reason why our State Department decided to keep tabs on what I was doing there. Is I started to receive checks from the United National Bank of Grenada, this did not imply that I was being salaried or paid by Grenada to do this work. They offered to pay my expenses. So if I had to do any traveling around the country, meeting up with people, getting documents, going from one coast to the other, or wherever I had to go to get materials, they paid for those expenses. So I kept an ongoing list of where I went, and they reimbursed me. Right. No problem. But between getting the delegate's card and then getting checks from Grenada, word got back to the State Department in Washington that one of our citizens is now a delegate of the country of Grenada that we're not even really having the best of relations with. And they're going to do something about UFOs. And there was a series of transmissions and letters that went back and forth between the State Department and the ambassador the American ambassador to the UN at the time. And basically, one of these letters said, here's who Grenada has brought together for this upcoming presentation in November. There's a former astronaut, there's scientists, Jacques Vallée, and J. Allen Hynek, astronaut Gordon Cooper. We understand the person responsible for bringing these people together is producer Lee Speigel. How would you like us to handle this? Yeah, that's obviously you knew that they knew, and there were a couple of times, not a lot, when I would be in my apartment in New York City, and I would go pick up the phone to call somebody. I mean, anybody, and I wouldn't hear a dial tone at first, but I would hear clicks, and at least one time I heard some kind of breathing there, and I thought, oh, really? Okay. So I hung up, thought it all through. Now, my friends would say to me, that's the point where you should have just said, forget the whole thing, just run.
Right.
If they're tapping your phone. So I decided, no, I don't need this crap. And so at one point, one day I picked up the phone, no dial tone. And I said, guys, I'm not going to call anybody now that has anything to do with what I'm doing at the United Nations. So if you guys want a coffee break or something, you might as well not listen to this particular call, because it's not going to do any good. And you won't have to rewind it later and listen in and whatever. And after that, I never had the impression that they were listening ever again at that point.
Now, I wanted to pull up a couple of pictures because before the actual conference, there was a press conference held. Now, I thought the 1927 Yankees had a murderer's row. But this is the press conference where the prime minister, if you could just take us around the table a little bit here, there'll be a lot of familiar faces.
Okay. Well, in fact, okay. In fact, can you go to the other picture first that shows the rest of us sitting there in a row? Or is that the only one you have?
Yeah, I didn't pull up the other one, but I know the one you're talking about. Gordon Cooper was in it and so forth. No,
well, actually, that was the black and white one. Oh, so you don't have that picture either. Okay.
No.
All right. Well, this press conference was held on the day of the presentation in November of 1978. And this was done in between the morning session and the afternoon session. So some people could take a break, but the press was in there on one side of the room. You could have family and friends on the other side. And at this long table at the front of the room, in front of the United Nations logo, starting from left, in that lovely checkered jacket was Stan Friedman, nuclear physicist, because he was one of my speakers there at that day. Next to him in the three-piece brown velvet suit looking like Serpico or Cat Stevens was yours truly.
I thought that was one of the Bee Gees myself.
Well,
that's you.
Yeah, that's me. That was me. And next to me there was a man named Wellington Friday, who was the Grenada Minister of Education. Next to him, and being very boisterous and wouldn't allow anybody else to talk, was the Prime Minister, Sir Eric Gehry. Next to him, not really enjoying himself because of Eric Gehry, smoking that pipe, was Dr. J. Allen Hynek.
Amazing.
And who you can't see right next to Allen was Jacques Vallée. And then sitting next to Jacques Vallée was Army Lieutenant Colonel Larry Coyne, who was involved with one of the most incredible near-collision UFO encounters in history in 1973.
I'm going to pull up, I think Bill.
There's the other picture at the top. So now you can see us all sitting in a row there.
The Jacques Vallée.
Yeah. And as many of your listeners know, Jacques Vallée was the real-life model of the French scientist that was in Close Encounters of the Third Kind, the Steven Spielberg movie.
Yeah, and I can see Lieutenant Colonel Coyne isn't looking like he's having a lot of fun.
No, he wasn't, but he had already done his speech, and I'll tell you the story about Colonel Coyne because he was on my UFO album that I did in 1975.
Let's Lee. Let's hold that story for the other side of the break.
Oh, right, exactly.
Yeah, we got to take a break.
But Bill's in our ear. I know you know all about that.
Bill, who is there? A Bill that's involved with this?
Got to get right down to it.
Bill is lurking.
And if you're very cool with this, Lee, I can open up the phone lines in the next hour.
Sure.
People may have some questions for you as well, but I definitely want to finish that story.
Yeah.
And before you had mentioned, I actually said, looks like the same cast from Close Encounters when they were actually around the table together.
It does.
Yeah.
They were there.
And that's something when we come back, I also want to touch on because there's a connection there we'll get into.
Yes, absolutely. You are watching Dead Air Full Spectrum. Our very special guest, Lee Speigel, will be back on the other side of the break. Stay with us.
Hey members, the new KGRA-DB app is now available on iOS and Android devices. Gain on-demand access to any KGRA-DB programming. Download any show directly to your mobile device to listen or watch on the go. Go to the App Store and search KGRA-DB.
I don't want to talk about it.
I don't want to talk about it.
Families don't have to talk about everything, but they should talk about how to plan for an emergency. Get tips and resources to make your family's emergency plan.
Welcome to the new KGRA digital broadcasting website, thekgradb.com. Here you'll find great new content, including the KGRA Classics, great shows from our archives. You'll be able to see the show times and information so you can see what show is currently on air. The On Air Live button, so just go to this section and you'll be able to hear the show live with exceptional sound quality. We also have the Vault section. Make sure to subscribe to get access to great content and special features. We have the make content for our latest news and events, so make sure to sign up and you can be part of our forum. So make sure to check out the new KGRA digital broadcasting website, thekgradb.com. We look forward to seeing you there, and we hope that you enjoy the new website.
You know, Bill, if you're going to do the commercials for KGRA, can you at least, with that New York accent, do more like a wise guy, like give you an offer you can't refuse? You know,
Yeah, hey, these guys.
hey, what's going on?
I
Forget
have
about it.
a quick question for you. If I hit this little button, tell me if I'm muted. 1, 2,
You're muted.
6, 7. Yeah, the mute works.
Mute works.
Good. Okay.
If you want to lower your mic, which is what Bill was requesting, you go to the bottom where it says Cam Mic, and then click on the audio, and you can draw it down just a little bit. It says you're coming through.
You mean physically put it down?
No. On
Well,
the screen, you see where it says Cam Mic at the very bottom. Can you see that?
Yeah.
All right. Click on Cam Mic.
Yeah. Did it?
Sorry, guys. Stay with us. And then go to the left where it says Audio.
Yep. Did
And
it?
then you have a volume level at the bottom. You can slide left or
Let's
right.
see.
Slide a little bit to the left. It should be.
Let me see if I can. Whoops. Hold on. Actually, no. The place that I can do that actually is right here.
Please
Okay.
stand by.
Okay. Testing 1, 2, 3. Is this any different now?
Same.
Okay. How's this?
I think it sounds great.
Yeah, we all sound great.
Oh, it sounds all right.
Bill's he's a consummate professional. And so the levels are just. Plus, he's got this. I mean, it looks like NASA at his house. So he's got all these different things he can look at. And see what's going on there.
Oh yeah.
I think half of them work. It's just for show.
So anyway, Ken, could you put that picture back up? And I'm going to put up the phone number here in a second, so you guys can actually call in. And if you have questions for our very special guest, Lee Speigel.
Can I make a suggestion? Did you get this picture from the page on my website that just says UN?
I think Bill put that.
Bill's the one that put this one up.
Oh, okay. Because there's another picture there that actually shows Gordon Cooper with Jacques and Alan Hynek and me. That's the black and white picture that I always love showing people.
Yeah, and I went past that in deference to this one.
That's okay.
My apologies for that. We do have, I think, Jacques Valley.
And actually, this picture that you're looking at, this is like one that I didn't even know about until we actually got the full footage of my presentation 40 years after the fact. It looks like I'm photobombing this picture. Jacques Vallée is giving his speech at the front. Alan Hynek is in the upper left corner with the pipe. And all the way over on the right, talking to one of the ambassadors, is me in the very far corner.
Mm-hmm.
Sharing secrets.
And I like to show this picture to people who, over the years, have suggested that maybe I never even really was there that day.
Yeah, I kind of teased this before we went to break. You also had another potential benefactor from a very odd place, and maybe he's a director that people might have heard of.
Well, if you're referring to a guy, I hate to say his name in public, but excuse me, James Fox.
Yeah.
I mean, you know what? That's very
in the UN.
You know, that's very funny because James Fox, and I love James dearly, but I also love Steven Spielberg dearly too. So
yeah, he wanted to, and I'm going to sort of project this. This was around the time they were doing Close Encounters, and of course, Dr. Hynek was a consultant, and
yes.
Francois Truffaut,
right,
portrayed Jacques Vallée.
That's right.
And I would imagine that Spielberg already had some level of interest in this to go forth with this project, but he also offered whatever assistance that he could to you guys as well. Yes,
I didn't know at first, but while they were still working on Close Encounters, Dr. Hynek gave a copy of my UFOs, the Credibility Factor album to Steven Spielberg when they were all in the early stages of the movie. Mm-hmm. And once we got the go-ahead to do an actual presentation at the UN, I got, all right, just to give it a timeline, Close Encounters came out, it was the big holiday movie of 1977. Okay, and so we were starting to work on the UN thing at the beginning, early 1978. So I already had Alan Hynek and Jacques Vallée signed up to be two of the speakers. I got a call one day from a man named Marvin Levy, who was, and I believe still is, all these years later, Steven Spielberg's personal publicist.
Amazing.
Yeah. And Marvin called me in New York and said, would I be available to come out to Hollywood and to have a meeting with Steven, Alan Hynek, and Jacques Vallée to talk about my upcoming UN presentation? And I said, let me check my calendar. Yeah, I can do it. I mean, really, I'm going to say, no, I can't make it. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, hon, that anniversary thing is going to have to wait at this
point. Yeah. I no longer celebrate my birthday either.
Correct.
So off I went to California, and it was great. This was actually the first time that Jacques and I met face to face when I went out to California. And Alan and I were already friends because he helped me a lot with my UFO album. But we went to Steven's office on one of the movie sets, and he was very cordial, very, very happy to talk to us, and wanted to know if there was anything that he or the studio could do to help in the preparation that we were right in the middle of getting ready for the November event. And he said, and he had instructed Marvin Levy, his publicist, to make sure that the studio would give us any promotional materials or background information about UFOs and publicity and stills and documents and files that Alan Hynek had given him during production for the movie, and they sent us a lot of stuff that we put into our own press package that we handed out to every nation there in November. So when delegates showed up in the room where we did the event, where they sat down, there was already a press packet together that we had put together that included documents, stills, information, and they had it all there. And we made sure that every package was duplicated so that at the press conference, in between the morning and afternoon session, all members of the press could have everything that we had put together. I wanted to make sure everyone had everything. And there was, there was one particular thing in that package that I thought was going to hit the roof. I thought it was going to be a home run. And the media didn't really jump on it. The other countries didn't really jump on it. And for years, I wondered, what the hell did I do wrong? Earlier that year, when I was working on putting the presentation together, I was out at Dr. Hynek's office north of Chicago, and we were looking at all the documents that we had been gathering, old, previously classified Air Force documents, things that he had gathered when he was still the consultant for the United States Air Force. And I said to him, Alan, this is all really good stuff, but I'm still hoping we can come up with something that I would consider a smoking gun, something that I think would really blow this thing wide open. And I have to believe you were with the Air Force. You were the scientific consultant. You came up with the swamp gas theory of UFOs. You were the guy that had to put it all under the rug whenever there was a big wave of sightings somewhere. The Air Force called on you. I have to believe you had a high enough security clearance that you could go into certain rooms and look through some of their files. Did you? And he walked over to one of his filing cabinets and he pulled out a manila envelope. And he brought it over to me. And as he handed it to me, he said, I don't know if you will consider this a smoking gun, but if you like this, I give you permission to make some copies of it, and we can include it in our press kit for the UN coming up in November. And I'm opening up this thing, and I'm looking at these pages, and I'm like, are you kidding me? Where did you find this? And how did you get this? This is like incredible stuff. And what I was looking at was in 1968, 10 years prior to our UN thing, in 1968, at the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs, part of the curriculum, the science curriculum for cadets, they had a science book. It was in the physics department. The name of the book was Introductory Space Science, Volume 2, Department of Physics, United States Air Force, and I was looking at Chapter 33, titled Unidentified Flying Objects. And from the very beginning of this long chapter to the end, they basically were outlining to cadets, which meant this was only intended for eyes-only cadets, our future Air Force leaders, not ever meant for the public, the current state of thinking or opinion about UFOs by the Air Force. They were giving this information to the cadets. And I was reading this stuff, and I said to Alan, how did you get this? And he said, it's not important how you got it, but if you think it's good enough. I said, yeah, this is good enough. The media should jump on this. And they didn't. And it wasn't until several years later. Remember, we did our presentation in 1978. It wasn't for another few years that we had this thing called the internet, where people could go online and look stuff up, where this eventually made its way to the internet, but it wasn't available with the easy access in 1978. And I've been so frustrated that they didn't pick up on this as a story. And if you've got a minute or two, I would like to read you a couple of excerpts from this chapter.
Certainly.
And in fact, I will let you guys know, let your audience know that if anybody out there within the sound of my voice, if anyone would like to get the complete chapter, I'll send it to you for free. And I'll tell you where to send it. It's simply, my email address is contact@leespeigel.com. Spiegel is spelled Speigel. Contact@leespeigel.com, and I'll give it to you again in a minute. But let me read you a couple of things. They start off on this chapter to the cadets. What we will do here is to present evidence that UFOs are a global phenomenon which may have persisted for many thousands of years. And they go down to some theories as to the nature of UFOs, and they only have 4 categories: mysticism, hoaxes, and rantings due to unstable personalities, secret weapons, and natural phenomena. And then they have a 5th one, simply alien visitors. Well, okay. They go through all of the other 4 first to kind of wash that all away, and then they're left with alien visitors. And this is what they say. The most stimulating theory for us is that the UFOs are material objects which are either manned or remote controlled by beings who are alien to this planet. There is some evidence supporting this viewpoint. And they go on to say, and you have to keep in mind, talking about something that the cadets were reading in 1968, a year before the Air Force closed Project Blue Book.
Project Blue Book, correct.
In which they said, after studying 12,000 plus cases of UFOs, we've come to the conclusion that A, there's nothing of any scientific interest that we have found about UFOs. B, there's nothing that indicates that UFOs could be of any threat to our national security. And C, after studying all of these cases, nothing indicates that perhaps anything could involve an extraterrestrial craft. That was in the conclusion when they deleted Project Blue Book in 1969. Mm-hmm. But here's what they were saying to their cadets in 1968. And they list all kinds of examples through history going back 50,000 years. In fact, they get to the conclusion part here. From available information, the UFO phenomenon appears to have been global in nature for almost 50,000 years. The majority of known witnesses have been reliable people who have seen easily explained natural phenomena, and there appears to be no overall positive correlation with population density. Excuse me. This leaves us with the unpleasant possibility of alien visitors to our planet, or at least of alien-controlled UFOs. However, the data are not well correlated, and what questionable data there are suggests the existence of at least 3 and maybe 4 different groups of aliens, possibly at different stages of development. Do you need me to repeat that sentence for you? I mean, wow.
Incredible.
Then it goes on. This too is difficult to accept. It implies the existence of intelligent life on a majority of the planets in our solar system, or a surprisingly strong interest in Earth by members of other solar systems. A solution to the UFO problem may be obtained by the long and diligent effort of a large group of well-financed and competent scientists. Unfortunately, there is no evidence suggesting that such an effort is going to be made. Are they kidding? Because less than a year later, when they closed Project Blue Book and they said there's nothing of any scientific interest, and now here we are, 2021, especially after the unclassified UFO UAP report that came out at the end of June of this year, in which they basically have admitted not only that there are things in the skies that we have no idea what they are, they outperform, they outmaneuver anything we've got. We're looking into the possibility that it could be another nation on Earth, like Russia or China, but that's not feasible. And they even admitted that, yeah, science should really take a look at this. Mm-hmm. So the thing is, Ken, I keep bringing this up. If the Air Force was saying all this stuff to the cadets, and then they made their pretty dumb conclusions at the end of Project Blue Book, where has the Air Force been ever since the Navy has come out over the last few years, and their jet fighter pilots have been talking about chasing Tic Tacs and the videos, and yet not a peep from the Air Force.
And this is going to bring us to the next thing that I want to enter. What a perfect segue. The idea, I mean, that this is part of the curriculum of the Air Force Academy. It's just mind-boggling to me. Before we get to the next topic I want to touch with you.
Okay.
We do have a caller online. Ron,
okay.
Minnesota is with us. Ron, you are on Dead Air with Lee Speigel.
Hey, how you doing? Is this Ken?
Hi, buddy.
Hi, Ron.
Lee and Bill, and thank you for the show. Excuse me, a little throat problem as well. A little frog.
I've got a cough. I have an extra cough drop here if you'd like one.
Thank you. I had the pleasure
anytime.
of meeting you at Pine Bush, Lee, and I wanted to say thank you for you showing up there and being there, presenter. And I said hello to you. I don't know if you remembered me or not. I'm from Minnesota.
Well, now I'm beginning to remember you. And let me ask you something. Did you happen to like the videos that I showed from the United Nations presentation?
I did. Yes. And,
go ahead.
Well, you touched on a little something about different evolution time of the alien beings. That's why they might look different, right? In your suspicion.
Well, there's so many different. Well, first of all, Ron, let me say this. I'm not automatically assuming or believing that all of these reports that we hear from people who have actually seen occupants that are associated with some of these machines. I'm not totally convinced that it's extraterrestrial. I think that there are other possible explanations of where these intelligences can come from. And I'm also of the mind that why would they look human? Why wouldn't they have had their own evolutionary processes that allow them to look completely different based on where they come from and the situation from what kind of a planet they came from, if they came from a planet? We just don't know. And the debunkers will say, well, why hasn't there been a really good, clear photograph of an alien or an extraterrestrial so we can actually see them? Well, because not everybody has a camera that's ready to go when they're confronted with something like that.
Yeah.
And
Forget we haven't. Yeah.
yeah, I mean, the debunkers will say, we live in an age now where now everybody's got a smartphone and everybody's got the cameras. Well, yeah, that may be, but if you're in a situation where you suddenly are being somehow paralyzed by something that you're witnessing or whatever, you don't have a whole lot of time to get your phone out and start fumbling through it and take pictures before that thing is gone. I mean, you just don't have the time to chronicle things the way we all would like to think we can.
Yeah.
It's an easy out, of course, for the debunkers who say, "Well, then there's no evidence. Let's move on to the next thing," right?
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm hoping that there's so much life out there in the universe that they don't look human, that they don't look like we do. Certainly the problem of trying to communicate with any other kind of species, we would all have to learn how to do that any better than learning how to talk with insects. In fact, I was just talking about that thing from that the Air Force had given the cadets, and they said something here. Let me see if I can just find it. Oh, yes. Part of the chapter that the Air Force told the cadets in 1968, they said to the cadets, "Why no contact?" And it said, "That question is very easy to answer in several ways. We may be the object of intense sociological and psychological study. In such studies, you usually avoid disturbing the test subject's environment." And then they go on. They say, "You do not contact a colony of ants, and humans may seem that way to any aliens. A variation," they say, "a zoo is fun to visit, but you don't contact the lizards."
Similar
wow.
Similar to the approach any anthropologist takes.
Sure.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much for this show, and thank you for all the hard work you do on that subject. And
thank you, Ron. Thank you, Ron. And will I see you next year at Pine Bush?
And yes, I will be there, and I'll have to drive another 25 hours.
Oh my God!
Oh my goodness!
Well, thank you. More power to you. It's great to hear your voice.
Get a good head start on that, Ron.
You. All right, have a great night.
All right,
thank you,
buddy. Now I talked about a segue into this, and George, I know, can jump in, join us anytime. When you're talking about curriculum, when you're talking about disclosure, of course, the big story of 2021 took place in May with the UAP report to Congress.
Yeah.
Now, I'm sure you've covered this 100 times, but for our audience, bottom line, is this something, nothing, much ado about nothing? After reading the report, which I think is a whopping 9 pages, 25% of each page is covered by the heading more than anything else. General takeaways. I know there's a lot to unpack there, Lee, but what do you come away with on that?
what I came away with there, Ken, is that, first of all, as you just pointed out, 9 whopping pages, but it wasn't the classified report. There was a bigger report that the members of Congress were able to see that was more extensive. But the public only had a chance to see the more watered down version. But even in the watered down version, the key thing for many of us who have been researching this for a long time is that now really finally the government is now admitting finally that there are objects operating in our skies, not just over America. This is a global phenomenon, operating in our skies with impunity, which means they can come and go as they want, and they do.
Nothing you can do about it.
Nothing we can do about it. And it's obvious now after decades of really studying the phenomenon. And that's another thing. For decades, the Air Force was always claiming it was either a weather balloon that crashed at Roswell in 1947, or that it wasn't a weather balloon. Then it became a spy satellite balloon so that we can monitor.
All terrestrial explanations.
Yeah. And yet what they weren't telling us is that we really are still investigating this, because whatever this phenomenon is, of course it has something to do with our national security. How could it not?
Sure.
And not just ours, but the national security of every country that these things appear over. So this is a global thing, and it was one of the reasons why I wanted to go to the United Nations, because it's not just something happening in our country. No one leader of any country should have the right or the responsibility to make that final disclosure statement to the public. It has to be global, bilateral information from all nations.
Right.
And,
I don't know. No, go ahead. Please finish your point.
Well, I was going to say, and that's why in the report that came out in June, at the very least, they were now admitting that there is something going on in the skies. I mean, for decades, it was always, well, it's the planet Venus. Oh, it could have been the moon. It could have been a misidentification of a lenticular cloud formation. Oh, it could have been swamp gas. I mean, they kept coming out, feeding the public all of this crap when most of us knew, who look at this seriously, and they knew that it was crap, that they were still investigating this because they had to, because it is of such importance to us. And only now do you start realizing there are more scientists out there now that don't want to keep quiet about their own interests in whatever this thing is, because it should belong to science. Yeah. Much more than the military, but the military is here to protect us, whether they're protecting the skies or protecting the oceans. And you know, think of any major airline company, Ken. Every one of these companies that are they're now beginning to let their pilots go forward and to talk to the press about this thing that almost just buzzed their commercial airline. Mm-hmm. But the airline companies will still say, you know, folks, as far as we know, we're being told that there's nothing to worry about. These things don't seem to have any kind of aggressive feelings toward us. So please continue to fly the friendly skies.
Yeah. But, you know, I mean, probably not since the Cold War era, which I'm not sure ever really ended at some level. But yeah, you're talking about countries now with hypersonic strike attack capabilities.
Oh, yeah.
And is this part of what's ramping this up? Now, I'm not saying Marco Rubio and company decided that they wanted to get to the bottom of that, but is this kind of exacerbating people's fear, or maybe a better word is concern, whether it's civilian or military, the idea that we are starting, or we are going to very shortly start seeing things that can't reproduce the type of behaviors of what people have seen,
right,
or replicate it, but they can sort of mirror it to some degree. So how much of a concern do you imagine that is going into this?
I think the bigger concern is that I believe that the countries of the world truly don't know all the answers, because if this is a phenomenon, if this is something that has been reported and almost interacting with humans for, as the Air Force told the cadets, 50,000 years, this is nothing new. This is something that's been going on a long time. And there is this built up over such a long period of time. There's a fear factor of, well, if we can't handle this, what's going to happen? What if they decide to invade us? Well, they could have done that by now. What if they decide to eat us? Well, they could have done that by now. What is their agenda? The biggest fear factor, I think, Ken, that still exists, and it's been growing for many years, is that now there is an actual subculture of our planet, of citizens, who have come to be known as experiencers, people who've been reporting that they've had very frightening encounters with occupants of UFOs, many times in which they've been, they say, abducted, kidnapped, taken on board someplace and had physical exams. And none of us who have never had the experience can quite grasp what that must be like to experience that. And we're at the point now, historically, where not everybody is making this stuff up. They're not all lying. They're not all just repeating things that they've maybe seen in movies or on television, or many people have been regressed through hypnosis to recount an experience at the hands of extraterrestrial abductors. Is everybody lying and making it up? And I think statistically, you will find psychologists out there who will say, no, there's something else going on here that we need to look at. If it is something that people are hallucinating, that should be studied. If it's something that's having very extreme psychological effects on people, that needs to be studied by someone, by medicine, by science. There are fears that many people have about UFOs. And there's another thing also, Ken. There I don't know what the percentages are, but there are many people out there who they don't want to know the truth. They don't want to really hear about this that often. There's the late Stanton Friedman, nuclear physicist. Whenever he gave a lecture, he always said the same kinds of things to every audience in order to make certain points. His whole opinion was, based on his many years of research, was that some UFOs are somebody else's extraterrestrial spacecraft. Not all UFOs, but some. And he would always, when he gets to the point of talking about debunkers, he would always say that debunkers have a common mantra that they use when they talk about UFOs. And that mantra is this: I don't want to know the facts. My mind is already made up.
Right.
Yeah. And that's very true. Many people don't want to know about this. They would rather live their lives knowing that there is this other thing happening that could really seriously affect their lives, everybody's lives. I mean, there are people who, I believe, there are a lot of people who will insist this is the story of not just of millennium, this is the greatest story, the biggest story of all time, of Earth possibly being in touch with or contacted by someone from somewhere else. This is a very big story.
Absolutely.
And we have to all be very careful how we proceed and the kind of information that we give out to people.
Mm-hmm.
We don't want to scare people.
I have, and I want to remind people, the call-in number is at the bottom, or if you have a question in chat, we will try to get to those. I know that there are probably 400 comments in there, and I thank you on behalf of
Wow.
Mr. Speigel and all of us for, joining us this evening. Before I bring George in, because I want to veer off into something we talked at the top of the show and bring you to a whole different element.
Oh, yeah.
I wanted to talk about what was called the briefing card that we just, I think through the Black Vault and the Freedom of Information Act, they acquired. Now, briefing cards basically are talking points that spokesmen get when they do press conferences. And they released one, and different agencies got one of these. I think NASA, for example, got it. And they're really not unusual because actors get them if they're going on a press junket for a movie. The studio says, if you're asked this, we don't want you to give too much away. We're trying to sell tickets and popcorn. So say this and that. Well, they did the same thing seemingly almost immediately after the director of national intelligence, John Ratcliffe, went on Fox News and started, maybe talking a little bit too much. But, okay, so that was out there and exists. And the answers that you basically got in the UAP report to Congress that was publicly released, that for our eyes, are already covered in the briefing card as far as their spokesman. Everything is national security. Can't disclose this. We can tell you we exist, but we can never tell you what we're going to do. But one of the things, and I'm going to skip a bunch of stuff I had here. I want to get to something that's a little controversial, and that that controversy surrounds Luis Elizondo.
Okay.
and the ATIP program. Now, they maintain, and I'm reading directly here, quote, they claim he had no assigned responsibilities to the program, ATIP, Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program. This was allegedly the precursor of the UAP task force. So what I would like to know is, I mean, obviously he took a turn with To the Stars. He's their director of global security and unidentified on the History Channel. Who is that Luis Elizondo, and do people have any sort of good reason to doubt the veracity of what he says?
From what I can understand, Lou Elizondo was involved with, at a high level, with the governments, the military, the Pentagon's ATIP program, their behind the scenes investigation of UAPs,
Right.
Unidentified aerial phenomena. And when he decided that not enough people higher up than he on the ladder were being serious enough or being transparent enough to at least start giving bits of pieces to the public to be a little bit more transparent, he didn't like the way things were being handled, and he resigned. I think he resigned just before that famous New York Times piece came out in 2017.
I think it was 2017.
Yeah, in December.
Right.
And ever since then, and many of us out here thought, well, he's in for a rough ride, because his bosses and their bosses aren't going to really like some of the things that he's been talking about. Now, he's done a lot of interviews, and whenever an interviewer has asked him about certain things that he knows were part of the investigation from behind the scenes, he would always, or most of the time, he would bring up the fact that he couldn't talk about these because of non-disclosure agreements that he, of course, had to sign when he resigned from his post. That's what happens throughout the government, the military, even regular corporate businesses. If you leave a business after you've been there and you know certain things about how the business operates, you have to agree to sign these non-disclosure agreements. And he did that. And he tells people that he's done that. So he's very careful to walk a very thin line on what he can say publicly. And the government knows that. They know he can only go so far, because it could affect his retirement, his pension, I mean, everything else that he would like to look forward to in his golden years. I mean, I totally get that. I once, the first time that I wanted to interview an Air Force Colonel, Chuck Halt. I'm not sure if you've ever done anything about Chuck Halt. He was one of the deputy base commander of a place called Bentwaters in the United Kingdom. I think it was 1980, over the Christmas holidays. He and many other members of the Air Force there were involved with what's now known as the Rendlesham Forest UFO event,
right,
where they had many sightings of amazing things that were going on in the air, through the forest, on the ground, and I had just started working at NBC Radio when that story broke, and I was really intrigued by it, but it took me, I couldn't get to talk to him because he was still in the Air Force. And I finally was able to get through to Colonel Halt, and he agreed to talk with me if I wanted to come down. He was still part of the Air Force. He was near an air base and in Oklahoma, and I went to Oklahoma City, and NBC gave me a camera crew to take with me, and he said, no cameras. If you come with a camera, I'm not going to talk to you. And I said, okay, I'll do what I can. But NBC insisted. I was stuck in the middle, because here was the guy who said he would talk to me, even though I knew he had signed non-disclosure things the way I'm sure Lou Elizondo has done. But they gave me a camera crew, and we drove up to the front of his house in Oklahoma. He was outside watering his plants, and we drove up in a station wagon, and I got out of the car, and I went over to introduce myself to him, and he said, "Who sat in the car with you?" And I said, "Well, you're not going to like this, but it's a camera crew, and they sent." He said, I thought I told you no camera crews. No, I don't want to talk to you at this point. And I said, well, what if they stay in the car and it's just me coming to talk to you? He said, that I would agree to. And that's what we did. We went into his house. He was very resistant about some of the things that he saw in the skies and on the ground with all the UFOs and the people that were involved. And the interview didn't take very long. And I went back to New York, and it wasn't really a big enough story then. 15 years later, after he was retired from the Air Force, he was now starting to talk more about UFOs. I called him, and he remembered me. And I said, because I don't know if you remember me, but like 14 years ago, you almost threw me off your property when I brought a camera crew with me. And I said, I'm curious, why are you more open now to talk about what you knew back then? Why wouldn't you talk to me back then? And he said, and so many military people have said this to me, so many airline pilots have said this. He said, I couldn't tell you what I knew. It would have been a career killer. That's very important.
Well,
would have been a career killer.
David Fravor.
Yes.
Same thing.
Yes, exactly. And so the reason why there's so much controversy about Lou Elizondo, I think, is because I think he wants to spill everything that he knows, but he can't. Right. And so people don't trust him because they think, well, we have the right to know. No, maybe you don't have the right to know. Maybe this thing is so big, so really over all of our heads that you can't. What was Jack Nicholson in that famous movie? You can't handle the truth.
Right, exactly.
It's possible. That applies to UFOs. Maybe we can't handle the truth of what's going on. Mm-hmm. And so I have a great deal of respect for Lou Elizondo and people like him who want to come out and talk. You want to know who my hero is of the day, of the week, of the month?
Go.
Bill Nelson. Are you familiar with his name?
I know a lot of Bill. I know Bill Nelson, the comic. I know Bill Nelson, yes, I know who you're referring to.
The NASA administrator.
Yes, correct.
Okay. He runs our space program. And that means his boss, or one of his bosses, is, of course, President Biden, because he's running NASA. And so I would imagine that perhaps the president and Bill Nelson had a conversation where the president might have said, I know, Bill, you really would like to talk about UFOs. We've never had an administrator who didn't want to or who was interested in it, but keep it kind of soft if you can, but you have my permission. Because about 10 days ago, Ken, Bill Nelson was interviewed by the University of Virginia, and he was very comfortable because he was involved with the University of Virginia. He's a former astronaut. He's a scientist. He's running the NASA program, and he brought up the subject of UFOs in the interview. The interviewer didn't. And he said, nobody's really talking these days about the UFOs and what they could be. And the universe is so vast. We scientists really believe there's life everywhere out there. And I'll tell you right now, there are, as the administrator of NASA, I'm saying there are objects operating in the skies above our planet, and we don't know what they are, and we need to find out what they are. He said that. You can see the interview. It's like, this is historic that a NASA administrator would say something like that.
Yeah.
We need more of that.
Either that or Jeff Bezos will find out, one or the other. We've got about 10 minutes here. So
okay.
At the top of the show, you were saying, "Don't be surprised if I go someplace else." Maybe I can take you there. Unified paranormal theory. This has been kicking around for a while, but it's really starting to gain momentum now. And very simply put, we had a question from our friend Jeff Hilton in chat earlier about Mothman.
Oh.
So do these things. Is there a possibility? I don't know how familiar you are with this, but essentially what it says is you have Bigfoot sightings at the same time you have UFO sightings. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if we're projecting or we're connecting the wrong dots, but a lot of people are starting to question these things, especially in Pennsylvania for some reason. But you've got Bigfoot sightings, and people are starting to think, is it possible this whole idea of poltergeist phenomena, ghosts, demon sightings, cryptozoological sightings, and extraterrestrial sightings are all one in the same, or they have a correlation to each other? What say you, Lee?
I don't know if they're all one and the same, but I will tell you this. There are stories, legends, tales told by different Native American tribes of years gone by where they would see very strange looking objects in the sky, circular objects that would come down close to the land, and that they, as eyewitnesses, they said that very strange, tall, hairy creatures were dropped from many of these vehicles in the sky, dropped into the forests. And they even gave the hairy creatures a name. They referred to them as crazy bears.
Okay. Yeah.
And I don't know what that means. What is there a correlation? Why were UFOs dropping Sasquatches or whatever down from the sky? I don't know. But a few years ago, I believe probably you and your listeners may know of a place in Utah called the Skinwalker Ranch.
Of course.
Okay. Skinwalker Ranch. In fact, when James Fox and I did our interview with Senator Harry Reid, former majority leader, and Harry Reid, who got millions of dollars to help get ATIP started with the Pentagon, Harry Reid told us, and we weren't going to bring this up to him, the idea of Skinwalker Ranch, because we had other things to talk to him about. During the interview, he said, you know, there's a place, there's a ranch in Utah. And I looked at James, and he looked at me, and I said, what? Is he going to do this? Is he going to say this? He said, there's a ranch, and he didn't mention it. He didn't say Skinwalker, but we knew what he was talking about. There's a place where almost every single form of paranormal activity that's ever been reported takes place at this ranch. And not only that, it takes place at other places around the world in some of the similar coordinates around the planet. There are hotspots like this ranch where so many things are seen and experienced, where the original owners of the ranch had to leave because they couldn't take it anymore. And they sold the ranch to Robert Bigelow of Bigelow Aerospace Industries. And Bigelow put together a scientific team that was actually one of the people who created it was Dr. Jacques Vallée. And they brought in a lot of money for a lot of equipment, and they put cameras everywhere, daytime cameras, nighttime cameras, and they had total security. And they had scientists that were there nights and days at a time, just investigating what was there that they could find proof of. And one of the stories that came out of there was that on one occasion, some scientists were there, and they noticed that there was a light coming out of the ground somewhere. And they were able to see that the light got bigger and bigger, and it had a glow to it. And as they watched, they claimed that some very tall, hairy thing crawled out of this hole and walked away, and then the light was covered up again. The ground was covered up.
That's
like, wow. Have we heard a story like that before?
I have never heard, that particular story before.
Okay, so again, I happen to believe that there are creatures, I'm not going to say animals, from all over the world. You get the reports. Again, it's the same thing. If so many people have reported seeing something cross their road or drinking water off to a distance, and they all have the same kind of description of something that's 7 or 8 foot tall, completely covered with hair, they think it's a Sasquatch or a Bigfoot or a Yeti, abominable snowman, whatever they're called, wherever they're seen. Does this mean that everybody is lying or making this stuff up? There have been many pictures There have been videos, nothing as clear or sharp as we'd like to see. But again, like with ghosts and things like that, whenever you're somewhere, even if you've got a camera around your neck, if you see something that suddenly appears that wasn't there before, you've got to get your camera ready, and and by the time you're ready to snap, it's gone. You're not always prepared, and we need more investigation. I believe that there are these animals that somehow know how to evade or avoid humans. It's a big world out there with a lot of area where animals could hide. But if there's another extra added dimension where they may be coming out of the ground, like that story from Skinwalker, well, then what does that mean? What are we dealing with here? And there were people also at Skinwalker who had reported that, like, on a dark night when stars were out, suddenly a rectangular thing like a window appeared in the sky, so you could see the stars around it, but then all of a sudden they could see, like a window, like a sun coming through it with blue sky behind the sun and some ships that came through this window before the window closed. Like, what's that about? We're talking about many strange things that need to be investigated, and I'm happy to report that people are investigating it. Sometimes it's not the most credible, but they're out there. People want to know, and scientists really should want to know more about this.
Access is everything.
Yeah. Lee, we are up against the clock. We've only got 2 minutes before we have to turn it back over to Bill. Tell everybody about your show when it's on, and they can catch you, because these people have been going nuts in the chat tonight. So tell everybody where they can listen and view your show.
My show is Edge of Reality Radio. It's on Thursday nights on KGRA DB. Come on from 8 to 10 p.m. Eastern Time. And I also want, for anybody out there who's listening who would like that chapter that I was quoting from before, the Air Force chapter, shoot me an email. The email is contact@leespeigel.com. And I will send you that chapter. And it'll blow your mind too, I'm sure.
Fantastic. Yeah, we are certainly appreciative of you coming on with us tonight, and wish you the best. And Bill, he's from Long Island. He doesn't have a New York accent like yours, so maybe you can learn a couple things from Lee Speigel. Lee, thank you so much.
Thank you.
You have yourself a great night, and we'll connect again soon. Love to have you back on. We got so much more to talk about.
I look forward to it. Thank you, guys.
Have a great night.
Thanks. You, Lee. Be well.
All right, guys. Quick announcement again. Next week, we are going to have the Conjuring postmortem, including Mr. Ken DaCosta as an experiencer at the location, as well as Jay Blumke, hopefully Susan Slaughter, Andrea Perrin, and several others that will be joining us this next week at 8 p.m. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button, the reminder bell, and smash that thumbs up. I want to thank you all for joining us tonight, and we will see you again next week. Until then, guys, have a great week. We'll talk to you soon. You've been watching Dead Air Full Spectrum with Ken DaCosta and George Lopez. Thank you so much for watching. Good night.